If you've been feeling disconnected lately, like you're surrounded by people, yet still feel alone, this message is for you. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something is changing within you. There's a quiet shift that happens before we fully understand it. A phase where familiar conversations feel empty, where social spaces feel loud, yet meaningless, where you smile, nod, and participate. But deep inside, you feel like you're no longer truly there, and that feeling can be unsettling. You might start questioning yourself. Why don't I enjoy what I used to? Why do I feel distant from people I once felt close to? Why does everything feel slightly out of sync? This disconnection isn't rejection, it isn't failure, and it isn't loneliness in the way you think. It's awareness. You see, spiritual awakening doesn't always arrive as light and clarity. Often, it begins as confusion, as discomfort, as a sense that you no longer belong where you once felt at home. And that's because you're outgrowing something. Not people, not relationships, but versions of yourself. When your inner world begins to change, your outer world doesn't immediately catch up. Your values shift quietly. Your tolerance for surface-level interactions fades. Your heart starts craving meaning instead of noise. And suddenly, conversations that once felt normal now feel hollow. You listen, but you don't connect. You respond, but you don't resonate. You're present, but not fulfilled. That's not arrogance. That's alignment beginning. There's a phase in awakening where you feel like you're standing between two worlds. The old world no longer fits, and the new one hasn't fully revealed itself yet. And that space, that in-between, can feel incredibly isolating. People might say you've changed, that you're quieter, that you're distant, that you don't engage like you used to. But what they don't see is the internal dialogue you're having, the questions you're asking, the reflections happening in silence. You're not pulling away from people, you're pulling inward, because something inside you is asking for depth. Awakening often removes the desire for performance. You no longer want to pretend. You no longer want to fill space just to avoid silence. You no longer want to explain yourself to feel accepted. And so, you sit with yourself more. At first, this feels lonely, but it's actually the beginning of self-connection. Disconnection from others often happens right before connection with self deepens. You start noticing how much energy small talk drains you, how certain environments leave you exhausted, how some relationships survive only because of habit, not alignment. And this awareness can feel heavy. You might miss how things used to be, how easy it was to laugh without thinking, to belong without questioning, to fit in without effort. But growth rarely feels comfortable. When awareness expands, the old ways can no longer sustain you. You're becoming more selective with your energy, not because you think you're better than anyone, but because your inner world has become more sensitive. You feel things more deeply now. You sense underlying emotions. You notice when words don't match intentions. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. This is why gatherings feel different, why crowds feel overwhelming, why you crave quiet, nature, or solitude. It's not isolation, it's integration. Your nervous system is recalibrating. Your mind is slowing down. Your heart is learning discernment. Awakening strips away distraction. And what remains is truth. Another reason you feel disconnected is because you're no longer seeking validation the same way. You don't need constant reassurance. You don't need to be seen performing. You don't need to agree just to be accepted. And that changes how you show up. People who connected with the old version of you may not know how to connect with the new one. And that's okay. Not every relationship is meant to evolve with you. Some exist to teach. Some exist to mirror. Some exist only for a season. Awakening doesn't mean you lose people. It means you gain clarity. Clarity about who you feel safe around, who you can be silent with, who allows you to exist without explanation. And sometimes, that list becomes smaller, but deeper. You might notice you prefer being alone over being misunderstood. That solitude feels more peaceful than forced connection. That's not emotional withdrawal. That's self-respect. The world often tells us that being alone means something is wrong, but awakening teaches you that being alone can be sacred. It's where you hear yourself. It's where intuition speaks. It's where healing happens quietly. Disconnection is not the destination. It's a transition. You're shedding identities, old roles, old expectations. You're no longer the version that needed approval, or noise, or constant engagement. And because of that, your social landscape feels unfamiliar. This phase can feel long, uncertain, lonely at times, but it's temporary. As you continue aligning with who you truly are, new connections begin to form naturally. People who don't drain you, who understand your pauses, who don't require masks. But before that happens, there's often a quiet gap, a sacred pause. And this is where many people doubt themselves. They think, why do I feel so disconnected? Why does no one understand me? Why do I feel ahead of everyone or behind? But awakening isn't linear. It's internal. You're not meant to rush this phase. It's shaping your discernment, teaching you the difference between company and connection, between attention and understanding, between noise and presence. You're learning to be comfortable with your own company, to sit with your thoughts without distraction, to observe instead of react, and that skill will serve you deeply later in life. This disconnection is making room. Room for peace, room for depth, room for authenticity. You are not broken, you are becoming. And becoming often feels like losing familiarity before gaining clarity. If you're in this phase, be gentle with yourself. You don't need to force connection. You don't need to explain your evolution. You don't need to rush back to who you were. Honor the pause, honor the silence, because what feels like disconnection right now is actually alignment happening quietly. And one day, you'll look back and realize this was the moment you stopped living outwardly and started living inwardly. This was the moment you chose truth over comfort. This was the moment you began meeting yourself fully. And from that place, real connection will return, deeper, calmer, more real than ever before. Before you judge this phase, before you label it as loneliness or withdrawal, pause for a moment and observe it honestly. Notice how your inner dialogue has changed. You no longer rush to fill silence. You no longer crave constant distraction. You no longer fear being alone with your thoughts. That's not emptiness. That's awareness settling in. Spiritual awakening often removes the noise before it introduces clarity. It takes away the familiar so you can hear what was always there beneath it. This is why distractions stop working the way they used to. Endless scrolling feels tiring. Small talk feels draining. Crowded spaces feel heavy. Your system is asking for simplicity, for truth, for presence, and presence requires space. You may notice that you're more sensitive now, to tone, to energy, to intention. You feel when something is forced. You sense when words don't match actions. And once this sensitivity develops, you can't pretend not to notice. This doesn't mean you're becoming distant. It means you're becoming discerning. Awakening teaches you to protect your inner peace without building emotional walls, to step back without shutting down, to observe without absorbing everything, and that balance takes time. This is also the phase where old identities dissolve. The version of you that adapted to survive, the version that stayed quiet to keep peace, the version that laughed to belong. Those layers start falling away. And when they do, you may feel exposed, uncertain, undefined, but that's because you're between who you were and who you're becoming. You're learning to exist without labels, without roles, without approval. And that can feel uncomfortable in a world that constantly asks you to explain yourself. You might notice you no longer chase connection. You allow it. You wait for resonance instead of attention. You are learning that not everyone needs access to you. Not every conversation deserves your energy. Not every relationship needs to continue. And letting go doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like silence, distance, a gentle step back. This phase teaches you to be honest with yourself, to acknowledge what no longer feels aligned, to accept that growth will naturally create distance from what cannot evolve with you, not through effort, not through performance, but through presence. You start valuing depth over frequency, understanding over agreement, peace over familiarity. And slowly, the feeling of disconnection transforms. It becomes groundedness, self-trust, inner stability. You realize you were never meant to stay the same. You were meant to become more aware, more conscious, more rooted. This phase is not taking something away from you. It's preparing you to connect without losing yourself, to love without abandoning your truth, to belong without shrinking. And once this preparation is complete, connection returns. But this time, it's real. If this resonated with you, comment, "I understand this phase." Not for anyone else, just for yourself. And if someone you care about feels disconnected right now, share this with them. Sometimes, understanding is all we need.